My dear sisters and brothers, first of all, I would like to congratulate the organizers of this Central Asia Nobel Fest. Your topic on inclusive education is not only very important and timely, but this is something which is much more needed than ever before. Education is the liberator. Education is equalizer. Education is the gateway to justice, equality, peace, and sustainability. Education is the first prerequisite to achieve all human rights. And therefore, if any child is left behind because of social, economic, or political reasons, we cannot think of inclusive education. And therefore, all the efforts have to be made. Particularly in this crisis, when the world is at crossroads, we have to prioritize the issues of children and their education. COVID-19 crisis is not simply health or economic crisis. This is the crisis of civilization. This is the crisis of morality. This is the crisis of justice. This is the crisis of education and the future. We know that over 1 billion students, school-going children, are not in the classrooms today. And 465 million out of them have no access to online education. 370 million children were mainly dependent on school feeding programs like midday meals and conditional cash transfer or other incentives. And of course, their families were also depending on it. But today they are deprived of this basic facility for them. Dear sisters and brothers, we know that this is the situation when the rich countries have earmarked and allocated over $8 trillion for COVID response fund to rescue their own economies and bailing out companies and banks and other financial institutions. But the most unfortunate is that only 0.13% of this has been allocated for the most needy, the most marginalized children and people of the world. This is unacceptable because this is injustice. The pandemic has exposed and exacerbated all the injustices and inequalities which were already prevailing in our society. We can mitigate them through education. So we have to ensure that adequate budgetary allocations are made to protect education. We have to ensure that the teachers are protected and kept motivated. We have to ensure that the parents of most marginalized children are secure. We, as the Nobel laureates, have taken some initiatives. In the month of May, 88 Nobel laureates and world leaders came together, and we have issued a joint statement calling for fair share for children. We have demanded that 20% of the COVID-19 fund, response fund, should be allocated to the 20% most marginalized children and their families. This is justifiable. Later on, dear friends, on 9th and 10th of September, under the auspices of Laureates and Leaders for Children, a Fair Share Summit was organized. It was attended by millions of people, including three heads of UN agencies, several Nobel laureates and world leaders, including the Prime Minister of Sweden and so many other dignitaries. And we have urged the government, all the governments and the international communities, to take urgent action. We cannot afford to lose the entire generation. We cannot afford to turn the clock back. We cannot lose all the accomplishment and all the progress we have made over the decades. So we have requested few things. One is that 20% for 20%. Secondly, governments and companies must ensure that there is no child labor involved in their supply chain. Thirdly, we have demanded there should be laws in place, there should be education policies in place, and they should have proper budget available for them. We have also demanded that there should be a global social protection fund established. And finally, we are asking that once the vaccine is available, then this should be made available to every person in the world free of cost. It should be a common public good. Friends, the children who are suffering today and children who have suffered for ages, and millions of children who may fall into the situation of slavery, trafficking, child marriages, bonded labor, forced labor, child labor, they are all our children. This is the place. Central Asia, Asia is the place which has raised so many great leaders, so many great voices of morality. We have to stand by all those people who are left out, and particularly our children, to ensure free, quality, inclusive education for every child. They are all our children. Thank you so much.
Кайырлы күн, құрметті әріптестер. Добрый день, дорогие коллеги, друзья. Позвольте мне выступить на английском языке, скорее всего, благодаря тому, что есть некоторые термины, которые я, скорее всего, была бы рада использовать, да? Well, good day, everyone, again. This is Akmaral Sman speaking. I am currently working as a regional gender and livelihood expert in FAO project based in Central Asia. So my current role is basically to mainstream gender equality and social inclusion across existing huge project for Central Asia. But previously, I used to work with international organizations, and my main role was to reintegrate these gender equality and social inclusion aspects into the corporate policies. So what I want to highlight today is that we are in such a need to look at the inclusion from a broader perspective, because we know that when we raise the issue of inclusion, we always start with the discussion of people living with disabilities. But in fact, when it comes to inclusion, it is such a huge topic and such a colossal and multi-spectral issue that needs to be brought up into the discussion, because women, rural women and girls living in marginalized areas, they are also lacking the opportunities to participate in all these educational and capacity building opportunities. So what I think is that the discussions should be not only centered today inside of the government, inside of the civil organizations, in the population. It shouldn't be centered only on the providing the opportunities and equal access to education among the people with disabilities. Not only that, but also
образованию. И не только для людей с особыми потребностями, но и для всех. Всех, кто живет за чертой бедности, кто живет в сельских районах. И поэтому мы должны разработать такие внутренние структурные изменения, которые будут идти сверху вниз и снизу вверх, и наделять возможностями местные сообщества и понимать их понимание, их грамотность о вопросах инклюзивности. И я думаю, что я бы хотела
management level of those building the policies for inclusion, looking at the capacities of the personnel on each level of the education sector, on their knowledge and capacities on inclusion and gender equality. And I would continue also with building the communication in such a right way that people, young people who are reading the book would see their own faces, their own role in those books, but not only you know how it feels when you are a person with disability opening the book but not seeing any image of any people living with disability when some topics are being explained, or when you open the book and you realize that only let's say only white people are in there, or when you realize that only males are imaged. So what I mean is that in whatever context we speak, talk, or image or publicate in our knowledge materials, in our books, in everything, we need to, I call upon basically to ensure that images are reflecting all the society that we have. Also, it also comes to programs and projects that Ministry of Education, the education sector is implementing. Are the programs friendly enough? Are people feeling that they belong to the community, the schools that they're studying in? So these programs, they are in such a need to be mainstreamed in a right way that 1.5 million of people who are living below the poverty wouldn't suffer from, for example, when a mother has 4 children, and then now in such hard times when we have to educate our children through media, there's only one phone per entire family, and then 4 children going to school. So in these cases, how we are ensuring the accessibility through our education programs. So this should be also brought up into the agenda of not only financing, of course, but also thinking how to set up the flexibility in those education programs, flexibility in the learning hours, and etc. So I would really looking forward to contribute to the discussion, and also looking forward to benefit from this platform today. Thank you.
Thank you, Akmaral. We will now give Tawakkol Karman a chance to also say something. Karman?
Hello everybody. First of all, I'm so happy to be with you in this very important event, and also I'm so happy to be with my brother Kailash, and I hope that we meet very soon, brother Kailash. Look, I have always believed that the education is the basis for building strong societies and people who are capable of, bearing responsibility. There is, in every area, there is some people, believed in power, some believed in money, and some believed in science. For me, I am one of those people who believed on, education and science. Science does not only change the lives of people, but it creates a new life for all society. The face of the world has changed as a result of education. Now, in these days, yes, the rich and the poor are learning, but indeed opportunities are not equal. There are, countless ways to learn. the issue is no longer as impossible as it was, in the past. It is important, to see how the world has changed with education, but at the same time, we should, notice how, the gap between the rich countries and the poor countries on, reaching to the education. What about the inclusive, education? So this massive transformation needs even a greater transformation. We must create a big shift in the education, process. I believe that the inclusive education project is the most important project that we must strive and to achieve and develop so that it becomes available in all countries, especially poor countries, and not as the case today, which is limited to rich countries. The slogan put forward by UNESCO, inclusive education for all, everyone without exception. This is very, very, very important slogan. So in my opinion, this slogan should be our slogan, and it should be the slogan of all the movement. With the continuation of wars and armed conflict, on the one hand, and the deterioration of the economic situation in many countries on the other, and the world, entering a dark tunnel of serious pandemic, the fears of losing the gains made during the past are real concerns. This is also, in rich countries and poor countries, and more again in poor countries. To realize the magnitude, of the negative impact caused by COVID-19 virus, for example, we may point out to that, schools disruption and the inability of many students to obtain their share of education as a result of the inability of schools to provide the needed technology for remote education, or inability for many families in many countries to afford the necessary funds to buy computers for their children, as well as the reduction in teaching hours and the absence of the required interaction between teachers and students. The circumstances that many countries are going through urge to rethink strategies for communicating knowledge to students, regardless of their situation. I believe that it has become important to involve community and civil society organization in the inclusive education project or strategy. Noting that one of the priority of the inclusive education is to accommodate people who are unable to go to schools for economic reasons or reasons related to disabilities. And this is very important, as local communities remain more sensitive in this regard than government. However, what should happen is integration and cooperation between governments and local communities in popularizing this experience, and between countries that can contribute effectively to the success of this initiative by allocating a small percentage of armed cells to the benefit of this project. For me, I don't want small percentage. I want, at least, half of the percentage. But let's tell them small percentage. They have to make, commitment to the regarding that. And oil-producing countries can also allocate a small percentage also for the same purpose. Due to the increase in economic the disparity between countries, it is difficult to achieve any progress in the inclusive education without genuine collaboration between countries in this subject. It is also necessary to say that the absence, and this is a very important point, the absence of political reforms in many countries will constitute an obstacle to education and any other project benefit, to humans. It is not an exaggeration to say that wars and armed conflicts, spread of corruption, suppression of freedom of opinion, and violation of human rights for some are more important than education and any project or idea for the well-being and happiness of human beings. This is very important. As you know, as we work to achieve progress in the inclusive education project that exclude no one, we must realize that there are obstacles other than deprivation and poverty, which is the political despotism that appears in the behavior of many regimes and many armed groups, and those that cause preventing the education and cause poverty and corruption and conflicts. I want to say here that tyranny and the absence of good governance are obstacles to the advancement of any project. In my country, Yemen, after 6 years of war, education has significantly declined, and many Yemeni children could not join schools, most of which have turned into places to accommodate displacement people or into small camps. Besides the recruitment of thousands of children in this war, the Houthis militia bears a great responsibility for this deterioration, because it is an authoritarian group that has turned against the political process in Yemen. And there is also another responsibility, undoubtedly, on the countries of Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and Iran, who are fighting, and who are, destroying my country, Yemen. At least, my friends, it's very important to know that we need to protect education from any attack. Protect education means supporting teachers, funding schools, taking care of students, physical and mental health. It means also having economic justice that allows parents to send their children to school. It means having sustainable peace. It means to have collective actions to protect education from potential threats and risks like terrorism, war, armed conflict, extremism, and also from poverty and diseases. The list is very, very long of what it means to have an international day. And this is very important, that we need to make an international day to protect education and also to protect and to call for inclusive education. But this is why it's crucial to have such day and such gathering activities to remind us all of the importance of education and the threat it is under. There are many obstacles, but our ambitions remains great. I am one of the people who believe in hope. So despite all odds, we must work very hard so that everyone without exception enjoys an inclusive and virtual education. And again, we must protect education. When we protect education now, it will protect us in the future.
Thank you very much, Tawakkol. And now we will have some few questions to the two of you as the panelists. My first question to the two of you would be, how would you describe inclusive education? Which of those social groups are likely to be excluded in education? How would you sort of describe what inclusive education is in simple terms? What are the social groups that would be vulnerable for exclusion in the society, in the community? Do you start, Tawakkol? Would you start, Tawakkol?
Is this question for me? I didn't hear it. I just hear my name. So if someone Your voice is very, very low. So if someone repeat the question.
How would you describe inclusive education, and who of the social groupings in the society would be more vulnerable for exclusion? Did you hear that? Okay. I will use the mic.
The voice, there is voice, but it is not clear.
Okay, can you hear me now? Can you hear me? The volume is a little bit disappointing. The technical team will look at it now.
There is echo, big echo in your voice.
Can you hear me now, Akmaral? Can you hear?
Yes, now. Now.
Okay, I will repeat my question. My question was about how would you describe the inclusive education, and who of the social groups within the community or within the society are more vulnerable or susceptible to exclusion in education, in your experience? Did you hear that?
If you allow me to continue, then because I've heard the questions, but I don't know if Miss Tawakkol was able to hear. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, but can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you, but with a very slight echo at the backside.
Yes.
So if you allow me to continue in order for Ms. Tawakkol to join. Basically, inclusive education entails first of all, it's a human right to have free and accessible education. That's a universal human right for each and everyone to be able to have an education, a quality education as much as possible. But on the other hand, it's also a full membership of people knowing that they belong to their communities, for people knowing that they will have an access to any kind of education services without any discrimination, without perceived differences that people might put on them. For example, based on their gender, religion, based on their physical or health statuses. So that's what really inclusion entails for me. And what I feel about people who are most excluded from education is if to take in the context of Kazakhstan, we have nearly 2 million. Sometimes people say it's 1.5 million of people living below the poverty line, and I think those are the people who are the first in a row who are not having, at least at this time, they're not even having an access to their digital devices to have an access to education. Whereas me, in my personal story, I have a nephew. She's a person with disabilities, and then when she attended the school, she was not allowed to go to school. The teacher came to her place, which means that young people with disabilities, when it's a time to socialize, because of non-inclusive environment, young people are in such condition that they have to study tete-a-tete with their teachers, not socializing, not feeling as a part of the entire group. So, which brings to a meaning that the inclusion in education is a full membership, feeling that you have the same right, same opportunities, same infrastructural opportunities to fully enjoy your educational rights. So, and I think the group also, from my perspective, from what I have learned, not only in Kazakhstan, but also in Central Asia, is the role of young women in education. For example, to take the rural area, young girls, they drop out from the school in such early age that they have to, for example, take care of the elderly, so take care of their children in such early marriage time. And here there should be an intersectoral connection with this to raise the awareness, to improve the opportunities and access, and also to talk more about the benefits of inclusive education, talk more about the education in general to people. So what also is missing from the perspective of inclusive education is devoting certain quotas in different educational areas. For example, inclusion is also when you are putting, for example, 30% of the seats in STEM subjects in universities, or STEM subjects in a higher school, in schools for young girls. So it's also an inclusion, right? So here we have, for example, so many young women who are not fully enjoying their opportunities in STEM. And if they're inside of the STEM, and if they're having these quotas available, they're not having follow-up available environment. Let's say they're not having full membership to fully enjoy the educational opportunities. So this is what I would like to basically to sum up from my perspective. The floor is yours. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. My next question to you would be, what should the government do in the prioritization of inclusive education? How should they transform or reform their schools and education systems to make them more inclusive? What should be put in place?
Shall I continue?
All right. Yeah.
Yeah, from my personal perspective, is since I know that many from my studies, from my observations, many government-based projects and activities, they are functioning when there are orders from top-down approach. So in this case, I think what needs to be inclusive first is the government itself, the group of people who are developing certain policies on education, the group of people who are developing policies on infrastructure, the group of people who are developing the content for the educational knowledge materials. This group of people needs to be inclusive themselves first. So it means that we have to have people with a mindset of an inclusiveness. And then when we have at least quota, let's say, inside of the government, with inclusion of women, people living with disabilities, minorities, any rest of the group who were not included previously to this group of decision makers needs to be in that place first. For the government, inclusion means that everyone fully enjoys their rights, everyone fully have an access to education. Education is a big power. It's a power when we have a next generation ready to govern the government, next generation to produce the products, next generation to know how to increase the economy. So inclusion from the top down means that it's a long run strategy. It's from my perspective, it is where it needs to be started first. For the governments, besides of the quota, is to go down to the implementation of policies, and for example, to have this screening of policies during their implementation. For example, if the schools would be inclusive enough, then the management of the schools, if they were inclusive enough as well, then the implementation of the policies inside of the school would really affect on the results and openness for entire community. So these are in brief what I think the government should do and prioritize.
Okay, then my next question would be, how should the schools transform themselves into centers of inclusive education? What are the things that we need to put in place in schools to ensure that education is inclusive? Right? Thank you very much. I can see Tawakkol is back. So we were discussing the whole transformation and the changing of education system to make them more inclusive. So perhaps I need to pose a question now that you are back as to what do you need, I'm now asking to Tawakkol, what do you think government should prioritize to transform the education systems and schools to make them more inclusive? What are the things that must be put in place? What are the things that are important? Tawakkol.
Okay, do you hear me now? Okay. Look, it's, the inclusive education, it should allow students of all backgrounds to learn and grow side by side to the benefit of, of all. This is, what UNICEF, define the inclusive education. It's very important, for any government to know that inclusive education is the most effective way to give all children a fair chance to go to school, learn, and develop, skills they need. It's very important that, that every children, all children in the country has the same classroom, has also the same opportunity to go to these schools. It means, real learning opportunities of groups who have traditionally been excluded. Not only children with, disabilities, but also the minorities people, and also any traditional people who has been excluded. It's also when you talk about inclusive system, it's unique contribution students of all background bring to the classroom to allow diverse group to grow side by side, and as I said, benefit. So this is very important for every government to do. This is one of its, commitment to the society, to the kids, and also to the future of the country. And as I said in my speech, it's very important to know that governments will not be able to do this, to serve education, and also to make, inclusive or to guarantee inclusive education if it's a corrupt government, if it's authoritarian regimes who doesn't believe on, who are, afraid from education, who steal the wealth of the people, and who doesn't distribute, the wealth between people, and don't give, the chance for every people to have, its, chance to access to education or access to any other, basic services, to every citizen in the country.
Okay, thank you very much.
It's also, the teachers should be trained. That the community level, discrimination must be, tackled. It's a whole. It is inclusive process that guarantees that education will be for everybody, for every citizen, and for every kids in the country.
Okay, thank you very much. My next question would be that one of the main problems in terms of the inclusive education worldwide, it is the attitude of teachers and parents towards children with disability. You, as panelists, can you share your experiences? How can we change the beliefs and attitudes of parents, attitudes of teachers and communities and societies to accommodate and to accept children with disabilities in schools? How can we do that? Who wants to go first? Akmaral?
Well, what I think is the power of media is really strong in these regards. Power of media, I mean, not only what we see through the digital devices, but also what we read in terms of the newspapers, magazines, books, and all other resources. So the power of media is really important in here to mainstream the mindset to mainstream the mindset of inclusiveness, mainstreaming that it is okay for your children to go to school and enjoy the full membership. It is okay for you as a mother to support your kids with disabilities to go to a regular school. So it should be, in my opinion, in this digital world where more or less we have phones and devices, the media could play an important role to, let's say, mainstream these attitudes through the images, through infographics, through video materials, and through social media. I know one of my projects that I worked with previously was bringing young women from Afghanistan to Kazakhstan to get an education. I was part of the team to develop the concept of the idea. The thing was that the Facebook played an important role to mainstream the educational opportunity in Kazakhstan among Afghani women, although they don't have other proper highly used devices. So the role of media, the role of social media is important in building this kind of mindset, important to deliver opportunities available on the field, and important to also empower those who are left behind to come back and enjoy their full memberships.
Okay. What are your views, Tawakkol?
First we should recognize, their fundamental right to education. Then we should, start counting them. The children with disabilities are one of the most marginalized and excluded groups. Unfortunately, there is severe lack of data there is no, it's few countries that they really know how many disabilities in their countries and how many of them, as kids needs to access to education. So we need, to give them the chance to have, to access to education without exception. Unfortunately, most of them, they are being, excluded from schools than their, friends or peers. In some countries, more than that. Even, we should, the country should, make, all the facilities that allow them to come and, to facilitate their life. How can I say it in English? So there are effective means which can make inclusive and quality education a reality for children with disabilities. But again, first, we need to see them. Unfortunately, we don't see them. We need to see them. We need to hear them by hearing to their voices. Unless children with disabilities are accounted for, inclusive societies cannot be built, and the promise of the SDGs will remain unreleased. So there is a big responsibility, twice responsibility from the governments, toward achieving inclusive education for children with disability.
Thank you very much. My further question would be, one of the things that we have noted as far as inclusive education is concerned throughout the world is that when people have gone through education and they have got disabilities, they struggle to get jobs in the society. It means, how do we, my next question will be, how do we mobilize the societies to ensure that even post-school, people who have gone through education, who are having disabilities of any other form of exclusion, can actually have access to jobs so that they can be economically viable? What should be done? Tawakkol, you want to start? Tawakkol, you want to start? I don't think she can hear. Akmaral, can you hear?
Yes, yes, I can.
Okay, I'm trying to ask Tawakkol to start answering this question, but she, Tawakkol, can you hear me? She can. I think she can. She can hear. All right. All right, Akmaral, can you proceed?
What I think in this regard is that in private sector, I think there should be a mainstream of, let's say, sort of a certification of certain private organizations on inclusiveness. Yeah, when their HR is aware of, first of all, policies on inclusion. When the HR is HR has the tools of trainings for new employees to come and to educate themselves on inclusion. I think so. What I mean in this regard is private sector needs to have a core of their management and core of their hiring units to be gender sensitive and inclusive enough to hire people on their fields. Also, for example, building up such programs, for example, certification programs where government, for example, would recognize private sector for being inclusive friendly, would also, motivate these private sectors to have more inclusive environment for people to work. So there should be, I think, some, starring system, most probably for those private sectors to be friendly for the rest of the population. And this friendly environment, of course, comes from restructured internal organizational environment where the private sector has its own corporate policy, supporting people with disabilities, building environments starting from, let's say, elevator up to, the braille system inside of the building, having, room for parents and children. So enabling environment in these regards in private sector and starting this environment building, mindset of those private institutions would most probably motivate these institutions to have more seats and more, doors open basically for people, because we have people looking for the jobs. And this time, the COVID time, is great chance for people with disabilities to, to freelance, it's also an opportunity. Every disaster is also an opportunity from other perspectives. So, but once the time will come and then people will need to be back to the offices, partially or fully, the environments should be restructured. And the restructuring comes from the mindset of the internal management, not only from the government, but also from the responsibilities of those private sectors and their own internal policies on inclusion.
All right, thank you. All right, my final question. It's not a question, of course. I will give both of you a chance to say, in general, what is the significance of inclusive education, and how do you see governments implementing it in the future? You can use your own country as an example, Kazakhstan. Use the context of Kazakhstan or Yemen as an example. What are the things that governments need to put in place? This is the final question. So you can just wrap up about the general overview of what should change to make education system more inclusive. Can we start with Tawakkol, because she's about to go, I think. Tawakkol?
Hello. Sorry for the technical issues. I'm now hearing to you by YouTube. I received the voice lately. If you receive my voice, please tell me. Do you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you properly. Just continue. This is the final.
Okay. Look, talking about Yemen, what we need to guarantee the inclusive education. It's we need first to stop war. The war in Yemen should be stopped, so we will be able after that, to guarantee the education, the healthcare and all, the basic services, that now it's been lacked. Yemeni people, suffer from lacking, all the main services, especially with education. We need to protect also the education from attack from all the war parties, from also the Saudi and the Emirates, attack against Yemen. So this is our priority. Our priority is to stop war, to stop attacking the schools, universities, and the government, which is now under the what we call it, under the kind of house arrest in Saudi, should return to Yemen. And sorry for talking, political, issues in this summit, but it's very important to know. This you asked me about Yemen, and the government couldn't work in Yemen because they are, under the under the house arrest or something arrest, in Riyadh. They couldn't make any commitments to Yemeni people because Riyadh and Abu Dhabi is controlling them. So it's a complicated issue in Yemen. But war should stop, occupation should stop, militia of al-Houthi should stop their coup, and in parallel with that, we as a civil society, as a Yemeni people, should protect the education, should work with the with the students, give them initiatives, doing a lot of work to help education. We shouldn't and we couldn't expect anything from the current government under the rule of Saudi, and also under the rule of militia of al-Houthi.
Thank you, Tawakkol. Akmaral, your concluding remarks.
What I believe is that the government should be inclusive itself first. Having inclusive policy in opening the door to different social groups and people. And what I think is also the government needs to prioritize the knowledge materials they publicate and mainstream the inclusive from the materials they produce, and also the environment that those materials are being used at. When we talk about the infrastructure needs to, what I would see that the infrastructure needs to be real as based to the standards, not as a post factum consequence when we realize that certain, for example, the panduses are in different degrees and people having trouble physically getting into the building. So infrastructure, revising the infrastructure factually, not as it's only based on on written policies. And also now when we think that entire Kazakhstan, 80% of the Kazakhstan's population has an access to internet, but it doesn't mean that the people, the children who are studying, families, as I've said, a mother with 4 or 5 children whose kids go to the school are using one phone device to remotely study and do their homeworks. This is not the case when in this century we should be worrying about. So what I think is, this is what government needs to focus as well, that when disaster happens like this, we shouldn't be struggling. We shouldn't be putting these issues where mother with 5 kids cannot access fully the devices just because there is no devices and also financial opportunities for this. So this is what in brief I think is crucial and in top as a first priorities. But that's my personal opinion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Akmaral, and thank you very much, Tawakkol. I think we have come to the conclusion of this conversation around inclusive education. It has been wonderful to have both of you participate in this particular important session. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.